Hello, 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 everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be continuing on with our questions that we started in chapter 8. So we did a bit of an intro to what we're going to be working on, which is the questions that you're going to specifically ask each archetype that you've placed in your wheel that you may or may not have created by this point. So we read one section, and now we're moving on to questions that are going to focus on the past to the present day. So the first set of questions were kind of like openers, kind of getting to know the reason you chose these archetypes and why they've manifested in your psyche, that kind of thing. These are going to be more focused. So this this section is titled From the Past to the Present. And of course, we're still reading Sacred Contracts. It's still written by Myss. And the name of this chapter is Creating Your Chart of Origin. And that's exactly what we're focusing on in this chapter. So these questions are about as long as the previous set of questions. And that pretty much completes this chapter. All right. The next set of questions focuses on your present day-to-day life. They are scripted to prompt insight into your life as a work in progress. Answer the following questions for each of your 12 archetypes. So the first question, what lessons and wisdom have I learned from the partnership of this archetype and house? The Fool showed up in Mort's house of communications and siblings. Mort thought of the Fool as the carrier of hidden wisdom. The costumed court jesters of medieval Europe were often closest to the seat of power, precisely because they seemed harmless and witless. But their external disguise hid their talent for seeing through the games and power plays of those dancing around the king and queen. Mort had identified with the Fool's nature from the time he was a child. In making a fool of himself, he freed himself from adult conventions. As an adult, he used the same rebelliousness in his professional research and work as a chemist. I am liberated enough, or foolish enough, he said, to pursue research in areas that other scientists have declared useless or professionally risky. I consider them people who do research in approval. I am willing to be thought a fool when I share or communicate my laboratory findings with others, because every path of research leads to a discovery, even if the discovery is that the answer you are looking for is not found in this way. Having recognized the value of his Fool to his professional work, Mort was then able to look for its value at an even higher level. From a totally outlandish spiritual perspective, he said, I am also fool enough for God to inspire me to take on what conventional scientists would run away from. And what could be more tempting to the fool than to find a way to get close to the throne of the gods? Question number 2. What challenges am I presently confronting within the meaning and context of this house and its archetypal pattern? The Hermit showed up in Rod's 11th house, which is relationship to the outside world. And this union felt deeply appropriate because he very much wanted to keep the external world at a distance. But once seeing this relationship spelled out in the wheel he had just cast, Rod realized that he needed to evaluate why he viewed the external world as fundamentally hostile. He began to see that this negative attitude and fear had had a profound effect on his relationships, his choice of occupation, and the way he isolated himself. Rod's struggle to heal his isolation consequently inspired him to seek out a path of reconciliation by looking for ways to engage with the world on friendlier terms. The flip side of a hermit in the 11th house is represented by the lives of Henry David Thoreau and Emily Dickinson, among many others who withdrew from the mainstream of society to make contact with the beauty of life and nature. Dickinson, for instance, withdrew from life in her village of Amherst, Massachusetts, not because she believed the world to be hostile, but because as a hermit, she chose to live in a way that supported the tranquility of her soul. She felt undisturbed and able to relate to the whole of the world through her pen, leaving poems that speak of her deep love of life, nature, and God. Question number 3. What strengths and talents can I associate with this archetype house partnership? Tom was deeply troubled about his work. Whenever a conflict arose at the office, he was approached to handle it. I am a peaceful man, he said, and not one who generates trouble. Yet people look to me for guidance, and the authorities look to me for explanations and to give warnings. I don't understand my position. After Tom drew the disciple in his third house, which is self-expression and siblings, he said, I had a dream a long time ago when I was at my worst point with this situation. In the dream, a man came up to me and said that I had to absorb such conflict because I was stronger than everyone else, and that I could find the learning and the wisdom in the conflict. I told this being that I understood, and then the dream ended. Tom's disciple pre-existed in his present occupation. Tom had always relied on spiritual interpretation to explain conflicts, so it was no wonder that people turned to him for help in seeing beyond their conflicts. This technique made him a disciple, a soothing voice for the spirit. This interpretation made him feel as if he could deal less anxiously with his valued role as mediator. And the next question, what opportunities have come into my life that I can connect to this archetype and this house? In one of my workshops, a woman named Julie had the goddess, specifically Athena, in her 7th house, which is marriage and relationships. Julie had many of the characteristics of Athena, the wise feminine force who guides Odysseus through the Odyssey. Julie is supportive of her husband in his professional life and helps him organize his power by advising him how to win the battles he wages with his associates. Julie credits this partnership aspect of their relationship as the foundation of their success, and her husband believes that without her Athena influence and support, he would not be as confident, motivated, or effective. He's a strong man, but he would not push himself so much, said Julie. As a team, we combine our creativity, our time, and our determination. The next question. What fears or superstitions do I associate with having a direct connection to the characteristics of this archetype and the meaning of this house? Jan related to the wanderer/free spirit archetype and relished being able to pick up and go whenever she wanted. She adored being able to stay somewhere for as long as she desired and to hang out with new people wherever she met them. The idea of settling down represented a form of imprisonment. That would be the wanderer free spirit. Julie's wanderer resided in her 12th house, the unconscious, and in pursuing the question of what inner fears she most associated with this archetype, she said that she said that confinement represented a death sentence. Physical confinement is only one aspect of confinement. However, she added, I fear intellectual, emotional, and spiritual confinement just as much. Yet I fear doing any serious spiritual self-examination because I am terrified that I will hear instructions to settle somewhere or to become dedicated to something. It has occurred to me that my travels are my way of running away from myself. That's almost a cliche now, but there is some truth to it as far as I'm concerned. Out of curiosity, I asked Julie to offer an interpretation of her wanderer had it landed in her 1st house, which is ego and personality. She said she would be very comfortable with the wanderer there because it represents who she is, and it speaks of having a liberated nature. I would have preferred that this archetype had landed in my 1st house, she said, but it is obvious to me that my interior work has to do with accepting journeys that the divine directs me to take, as opposed to creating journeys of my own to avoid divine ones. And the next one. What unfinished business within this house relates to this archetype? I like that the author gives examples for each question, because then it can kind of help give us something to build on when we're thinking about our own. There's no better way to learn. Well, sometimes we have to do it ourselves, but the best way is oftentimes example. Frank had the shapeshifter archetype in his 8th house, which relates to other people's resources and to finances and legal matters. He had chosen the shapeshifter because he saw himself as someone who had a million faces, meaning that on the positive side, he could be flexible with people and very cooperative. But on the shadow side, he was unable to give his word and keep it. This sounds like me. He was always changing his opinions to suit his company. When this archetype landed in Frank's house of legal and financial matters, he recognized that this was the realm in which the shapeshifter was most prevalent and could be most damaging. He acknowledged that he had given his word to people to help them in business and then backed out for various reasons. Even as a child, he was unable to honor his financial obligations when he lost bets on baseball games. This archetype in this house held supreme significance for Frank and inspired him to review his entire relationship with power and business and his dealings with people. I have to admit, he commented, that this combination of the shapeshifter is not unlike getting caught with your hand in the financial cookie jar. I think a lot of us, part of our mission or part of our lesson here does have to do with money. I feel like that's part of something I need to balance in my karma would be money and my relationship with it and with people, with money, and very much the shapeshifter. The next question. What health crisis do I associate with this archetype and this house? What challenges relate to the emotional and psychological stress points appropriate to this partnership? Freddie's victim fell into the 6th house, occupation and health. Freddie was ambitious, but he was also unsuccessful. I victimized myself through the way I interpret my conversations with other people, Freddie said. I often make myself sick because this is how I express my feeling that I was victimized. That way, nothing is expected of me and I get the kind of support I need from people. When he considered that he was victimizing his opportunities, however, he recognized that nothing would or could change until he made some significant shifts in his attitude. Connecting his victim to his lack of success became a very real source of motivation for Freddie. And the next one. There are more questions in here, but the answers are shorter. Are there challenges that I consider inevitable that are related to this archetype's house? The gambler archetype showed up in Arnie's 5th house, which rules good fortune, children, and sexual encounters, among other areas of life. But he initially interpreted this energy from only a sexual point of view. A venture capitalist, Arnie felt excited by risky business investments and gambling on the stock market. He realized that he also gambled a great deal with his relationships because he often pursued women whom he knew would mean nothing to him. When he considered how children fit into this scenario, he stated that he thought having children was the biggest gamble in life and that he was not in any way drawn to the idea of fatherhood. Ultimately, Arnie had to confront the fact that for him, all forms of commitment represented a kind of gamble and that he was not willing to take any risks. At a deeper level, he also feared gambling spiritually or making a commitment to a spiritual path that might in some way demand he change his life. After some thought, Arnie began to see that the gambler in his 5th house might indicate that he could, in fact, try his luck at some form of commitment. Perhaps if he were willing to start small, he said, he would eventually be able to work his way up to bigger and bigger gambles and possibly risk a spiritual commitment of some kind. And the next one. Am I presently facing a significant choice point regarding any relationship or situation that I associate with this archetype house partnership? In looking for significant choice points, don't limit yourself only to the grand choices, such as finally deciding that you must sell your home or divorce your mate. A significant choice point could be deciding to exercise for 20 minutes a day, eat more healthful foods, or meditate. Such decisions over time can change your body, mind, and spirit. This exercise can elevate your appreciation for how intimately you are connected to the heavens. It is also the one that makes you admit you need to make choices in your everyday worldly life. And here's the next. What experiences would I consider divine interventions and surrenders in this house? What were the consequences of those interventions? This exercise brings your attention into the very heart and soul of the self. Martin had the archetype of the mercenary, which he chose because some years before, while living a drug-ridden life in South America, he had actually killed people for hire. One day, as he was preparing to carry out another hit, Martin tripped and banged his head severely, going into a coma that led to a near-death experience. As his soul separated from his body, he was greeted by everyone he had ever murdered. "We've come to tell you not to kill anymore," they said, as he hovered several feet above his inert body. Not surprisingly, Martin did change his life, and he now lives in service of others. Although he still identifies with the mercenary archetype because he realizes that he always has the potential to fall back into his old ways, his negative highest potential, wait, I think I read that wrong. Okay, his negative highest potential, period. He realizes that he always has the potential to fall back into his old ways, his negative highest potential. Okay. Like an alcoholic, Martin acknowledges that he is in a continual state of recovery. Most acts of surrender emerge not from such dramatic circumstances, but rather from the endless frustrations of trying and failing to improve your life, or from coping with the chronic health crisis that is listed as terminal, or from letting go of the need to have the heavens explain why things happen as they do. This question directs you to identify and appreciate the divine as a continual and intimate presence in every experience of your life. I describe this as playing hide and seek with God. Let's see how many we have left here. 1, 2, 2. Okay. What two experiences of betrayal do I associate with this house and its archetypal pattern? One in which I was betrayed and one in which I betrayed someone. Describe the reasons behind these acts of betrayal and the changes that occurred in your life as a result of being betrayed by and betraying another person. Betrayal experiences are archetypal and signal the need to release emotional and psychological dependencies that no longer serve us. Acts of betrayal serve a valuable purpose. They shake our faith in human justice and the social code, and move us to place our trust in the chaotic justice of the divine. Our need for total control derives from the fear of change. And when an act of betrayal shatters that need, we may become more open to change. In a sense, the floodgates burst and we are forced to float along with the raging currents or drown. When we ourselves betray someone else or an ideal we once held dear, it pushes us to examine what desperate need could have led us to go against our own best spiritual interests. Recognizing that we have a contract with the person who has betrayed us or whom we have betrayed can help us see the positive potential in such acts. This question makes you call your spirit back into present time. Incidents of betrayal are among the most difficult to forgive, yet reframing betrayal within an understanding of its archetypal purpose is like being handed a lifeline that can pull you back from the past. And the last question, I believe, yes. How does the challenge of forgiveness relate to the archetype in this house? Each house creates crises that require forgiving. In your first house, ego and personality, for example, you will need to forgive people who you feel in some way harmed your sense of self. Beth had the servant in her first house and said that she's always seen by others as someone to give orders to, as if she had been born to wait on people. People saw her as useful because this was the image that her ego projected. She described herself as the literary character Jane Eyre because she felt that she was always in servitude to someone, working to earn even a slight amount of affection. As painful as Beth's associations were with her first house, her ninth house, which rules spirituality, held her child archetype. Her associations with forgiveness as it related to her spirituality were a source of joy. Beth did not feel that God meant her to suffer and be alone. While praying one day, she felt that God wanted her to need him. She described God as male, and so he had to give her a path that required her to need him profoundly. This path came in the form of experiences that made her realize that she was in charge of her own self-esteem. So from the angle of her ninth house, her bond to God was born through having relationships that gave her much to forgive. From her point of view, this was a blessing. Blessings come in many forms, and many of the most painful times of our lives give birth to our greatest opportunities. A blessing in disguise is itself an archetypal pattern. By realizing the value of overcoming her attachment to the negative aspects of her servant, Beth discovered a profound sense of inner peace and liberation that existed beyond her earliest negative feelings. This question allows you to examine your struggles with forgiveness within every category of life. You can pinpoint your major challenges. Nicholas had to forgive one of his children for running away from home. He owned up to this while exploring the topic of forgiveness in the fourth house, which is home, in which he had his detective archetype. In real life, Nicholas was a detective, a role that inspired him for the first time when, as a fifth grader, he saw a film on the famous Prohibition agent Eliot Ness and the Untouchables. But he had allowed his profession into his home life so that his daughter accused him of always checking up on her and never giving her any space. Although he said that he was only trying to protect her from all of the things that could go wrong in life, she ran away at age 19. This rebellion enraged Nicholas and his wife. But I had to admit that I was even angrier over the fact that I couldn't find her, in spite of all I knew about tracking down people. I'm sorry, I thought that when they were talking about a kid running away from home, we were actually talking about a kid. And I understand your kids are always your kid, but they're 19. So I don't know, 19-year-olds do stuff like that. When Nick's daughter returned after an absence of 11 years, okay, maybe not that long, his wife welcomed her home immediately as if nothing had happened, he said. But I couldn't do that. I felt that she was responsible for the worst years of my life as well as my wife's. But I also knew that my detective pride was damaged, and I feared that she would pass some remark about my not being able to find her, which she never did. Nicholas knew that he still needed to forgive her, but this exercise was like a message from above telling him to get on with it. Having answered all the questions in this chapter as thoroughly as possible, your journal should be filled with pages of information, the raw data of your life. Now we can begin the process of interpreting your archetypal wheel, as well as understanding your life's spiritual path as supported by your many individual contracts. Okay, so that completes chapter 8, learning how to put together the archetypal wheel for ourselves and then go over all of these questions with each one. And I'm definitely going to need to take the time to narrow my archetypes down. I have like 17 of them. So I need to narrow that down and then move on to my next step. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, just do what you're in the mood to do, little bits at a time. Don't force yourself to do anything. I feel like if we do that, we don't get as genuine of an experience. And this is super important to make sure that whatever you're putting and wherever you're putting it is as accurate as can be, since once you make this wheel, it stays that way. We don't change it to suit us or to suit the situation when you're referring to it for future purposes. All right, so the next chapter is interpreting your contracts and your archetypal wheel, chapter 9. And we will go ahead and stop right there. Thank you all so very much for joining me. I love you all very much. And until I see you again, take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.